You are now listening to the Dual Position Podcast.
The boys are back to talk all things SuperCoach all season long.
Please welcome your hosts, Whisperer and Brew.
Mates, another week down. Back here on a Monday. More teams to discuss, getting closer and closer to Teamless Tuesday. And my side is starting to shape up nicely. I've finally looked at it again for the first time and potentially running with the idea of having Grant Munster. I don't know how I feel about that with them both being out round one, but it's an easy downgrade to someone like a Kiri and then upgrade elsewhere if it has to be. Brew, how's your side looking?
Yeah, changing a little bit. I can't decide whether or not I want to take Cleary or not. And obviously, whether or not I do that affects the rest of the side a great deal. I was looking at it earlier. Instead of having Cleary, I can take Cherry Evans, Luai, and Kiri. And I feel like that gives me three pretty good cracks at some high-scoring individuals under my current setup. So, yeah, it's evolving. The more news we get about Cleary, obviously going into TLT will help. I do think he will drop price at some point, but will it be enough to kind of offset the fact that you're going to be missing probably some good scores early?
I'm delving into the NRL fantasy side of things this year. Obviously, you and I have some friends in the space, and you and I are going to be playing it very, very casually this year, and more reports, Cleary's a must-have over there. But I think I'm pretty resigned to the fact in SuperCoach that I'm not going to be taking him. I know that you said you could build a balanced side, but just the dynamic that I want, I would have to have a pretty poor side around him. But then again, who knows what's going to happen until now in Teamless Tuesday. A little bit off topic there, but we are here to talk about the Sharks. A side with plethora of upside. They just missed the finals last year. I think they lost out the finals the last day of the season. They lost out to the Titans. They finished 9th, and they were basically the definition of bang average when you look at all the stats. They finished 10-14, which was good enough for equal 8th. Just lost out on 4 and against. They were 6-6 at home, and they were 4-8 away. So if they can increase the away wins by 1 or 2, you'd think they'd be making the 8. They ranked 8th in points scored with 520, which equates to 21.5 points a game. They were 9th in points against with basically 23 points a game, so a 1.5 point differential on the season. Like I said, man, basically the definition of bang average, nearly a 500 team, nearly the exact same points scored, points against. I've got them sitting in 7th this year. What do you have them?
I have them finishing 5th.
Ooh, okay. So it'd be interesting to see who's dropping out of there, because I'll make it no secret, the sides I have ahead of them are your traditional top 4, and then I've got Manly and Para in front of them. I know that you're not high on Souths this year, and you're probably not overly high on Parramatta either.
Exactly right.
Yeah. You and I talk way too much outside of this podcast. Look, I've got him in 7th. That's an improvement on 9th last year, but as I said, that 9th could have easily been an 8th. It could have easily been a 7th. The Knights were pretty poor last year as well, and they snuck in, so I don't hate the shout for 5th. I just probably think the first 5 rounds, they play the Raiders away, Eels at home, Dragons away, Knights at home, Tigers at home. That could possibly be a 5-0 start, but most likely be a 4-1, depending on how the Eels come out. So they could get off hot. They could also probably win 1 or 2 of those games, considering they have some new inclusions. It's going to be very interesting to see how they gel over the preseason and then how they look trials-wise. Where do you have the first 5 games for them sitting?
Probably 4 or 1,
Yeah.
or 3 or 2, I think will be the start. First week actually worries me. They've got a horrible record against Canberra. Canberra's currently on a winning streak against them of 5 or 6 games
In
off the top
Canberra
of my head.
too.
So I think that's going to be a tricky game to start. But if they can get through that, they could go anywhere up to 5-0. But I don't think they will. I'm more thinking they're probably going to be 4-1 to start the season.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they go against the Raiders in Canberra, and then obviously a decent test against Parramatta, which should be a pretty cracking game around 2, you would imagine.
Yeah.
Mate, they've had quite a few inclusions, quite a few players dropped out of the side. They've had Dale Finucane and Nico Hynes, obviously both coming from the Melbourne Storm. They've had Cam McInnes coming from the Dragons. They have Matt Nicovalu coming from the Roosters. They've got Lockie Miller coming from the Sevens, and they've got Jaden Barrell coming from Wynnum Manly in the Q Cup. With the exits, they've got Aaron Woods going to the Dragons, Sean Johnson to the Warriors, Chad Townsend to the Cowboys, Billy Magoulias to the Wolves in Warrington, Will Chambers to Rugby, Josh Dugan's been released/retired, and Nana McDonald has been released Apart from Billy Magoulias, man, I really like all of those departures. I think it helps the club massively. I do have a little bit of bias when it comes to Billy. I'm a huge fan. But all those guys that exit the building, I think, are perfectly fine. And you don't really regret seeing any of them go. Sean Johnson never really worked out. Aaron Woods, I mean, they've got a plethora of forwards at the Sharks. I don't really need him. Will Chambers and Josh Dugan, not guys you want around the club when it comes to culture. And then Nana McDonald, never really put it together in the last couple of years. Injuries and the emergence of I guess, probably 2 or 3 better wingers in the side. And yeah, as I said, SJ just never worked out at Cronulla.
Sean Johnson's obviously a loss. You can't say he's not a loss. He's a champion player, but they've gone out and got Nico Hynes, and I think that more than covers that loss, and it gives them a long-term halves option as well. So overall, I think they've done really well with recruitment to the point where I see them as a high-end club this season.
Jaden Beryl, I don't know a whole lot. I've watched a little bit of Q Cup. The reports are he is pretty handy. He's a hooker. A few predicted sides have him in the 14 role. I don't, but I could see a world where they do carry utility. Lockie Miller, I played a couple of years under him when it comes to rugby. When it comes to rep rugby, he was a few years older than I am, but I always remember seeing him at carnivals. And he was involved in the Australian 7 setup. Very, very good player. Give me his hand at league. Probably maybe a little bit too far past it to make a huge impact in first grade. He's 27, so it'll probably take him a year in Reggie's to get the feel of things, and then maybe by the time he's 28, 29, looks to pushing into first grade if he takes to it like a duck to water. Matt Ikuvalu. Brew and I have had differing debates on where we see Ikuvalu's role when it comes to the Sharks this year, but I mean, worst case, he's a fantastic depth signing. Best case, you get a bloke that is starter quality coming from a really good system. Cam McInnes, I mean, that signing we've known for a while, but we finally get to see it in full flight this year. And Dale Finucane, I really like this signing from a leadership standpoint, and you know we're going to get from him week in, week out. You're probably the most excited about Nico Hynes, Dale Mashimon, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to have a great season. For me, he's a champion player, and that being the case, he'll go well this season. I'm quite confident in that.
I'm confident too. I'm not as confident as you are to potentially start with him, but we'll touch on him when we come to our starting 17s. Craig Fitzgibbon, new coach, he is very fortunate to have no injuries and no suspensions. There's a couple of niggles. They've listed Wade Graham as a potential injury with his concussion, but you would assume he is fine to come trials. Same with guys like Andrew Fafita listed with his throat, but with quite a lengthy off-season, you'd think those guys should be fine to go. So Fitzgibbon should have his best 17 available to be picked. And his best 17, for me, lines up with Will Kennedy at fullback. I'm assuming there is zero debates here.
Yeah, no arguments. Will Kennedy's the fullback. He earned that spot. He's definitely the number one.
The thing I've changed up today about the format, normally we list our 17s and then we touch on the players that we like and we don't like. I'm going to sort of give my thoughts on each player in my 17, and then Brew's going to counter with his sort of players that we differ on, and then he'll give his opinions on all the players. So for Will Kennedy, I've simply put, unfortunately for him, there's just too many fullbacks for him to be a punt, and he's not even the punt that I would take over the big three. I'm assuming that you've got no stocks on Kennedy either.
No, unfortunately, he's, as you said, fullback kind of speaks for itself. There's only 3 or 4 genuine, real options, and Kennedy's not one of those for me.
The wingers, I'd be surprised if you've gone against what I've got in Katoa and Mulatalo.
Yeah, I do have the same, but some news you're probably bound to talk about might change my predicted 17 potentially, but I've got Mulatalo and Katoa definitely on the wings at this stage in time.
When it comes to Mulatalo and Katoa, both these guys will go on try-scoring runs. They probably won't go on them together, but if you can pick your time, they're both worthwhile servants. When it comes to Mulatalo, I'd prefer to take Katoa, and we'll touch on why in a second. I'd want to wait and see where Hynes ends up if I'm looking at Mulatalo, even mid-season when he drops in price, because I want to see how those guys connect. But Sione Katoa, average of 58 and then 59 in the last 2 years, surprisingly has a base power of 45, which is up there with some of the better centre wings. So he could be some value after he goes on a little bit of a try-scoring drought. I don't have the balls big enough to start with him, but with Brew and I going over the first 5 rounds, there is a world where you can pot up and go Katoa, because we know he's a genuine try scorer and that Sharks backline should be improving.
I owned him last season, and I'm pretty sure I owned him at some point the season before. He is a guy that does seem to make his way into my side. I did know about the base and power. He has a lot of tackle busts in him. He does break the line a lot, being a winger and a fast winger at that. So, yeah, I don't hate the Katoa call at all. I've owned him previously. He's always been a bit of a pod for me. It's just when you kind of pick your time to do that if you do go that way.
Yeah, so he will be streaky. That average of 58 last year will be 6 weeks of 40 and then probably 6 weeks of 75s afterwards. So if you can pick your moments, you're definitely going to make great room with Katoa. And as we said, with the draw, it could definitely be, it could be round one. One centre wing, mate. I'll let you touch on Jesse Ramian. I'm assuming we've both got Ramian in at least in one centre spot.
Yeah, I've got Ramian. He'll definitely play on the right side. I like Ramian. I think he is. I think I said it on the podcast when we did the centers. He's just a genuine option for me. He's a tackle busting machine. He doesn't get as many tries as he probably should. And if he ever does find that time where he goes on a bit of a try scoring run, he could be anything. Like a 33 at base is really solid. Minutes wise, he's obviously an 80-minute center. Half the time he goes 60 plus. So if he gets the uptick from the Sharks this season, presumably being a better side, there's certainly a situation where he could bump that average up, say 5 points just on getting tries or try assists.
How do you feel about players coming off career years? Because Jesse Ramian, taking out last year, had a career average of 48.6. And that was across 54 games. Granted, some of that was at the Knights, and the Knights sucked. And Jesse Ramian never found his feet there. But to go from a career average of 48.6 to what I think was 63 off the top of my head, a big 15-point jump. Thankfully, his game is friendly enough when it comes to base, and it's not so heavily relying on try scoring. Is that why you're more of a fan of the increase when it comes to base rather than him having a breakout try scoring year?
I always look for the base. I didn't realize that he's averaged it uptick that much. I thought, first of all, pretty much everyone's average upticked a little bit last season under these rules. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a bit of an uptick there. Like Rapana got 62.3. You wouldn't have expected that. And I didn't think Rapana had a stellar year by any means. His base was down on his usual form. Well, I'd have to look at what his figures were like when he was at the Sharks previously, because I remember he was a SuperCoach asset a few years ago.
I mean,
I know that's when he was a newer player, but
so the research that I did, we're recording this at 4:30 on Sunday. I did the research at about 2:00. He scored 73 points in 2017. That was through one game though, so I'm happy to discount that. And I think he went 48, 47, 48 in the previous years. So he wasn't as good as what we think he is. And yeah, I'm talking a 15.5 point increase, or sorry, 14.5 point increase. The saving grace is that it was not just tries. Like it wasn't an Alex Johnson level of increase, you know, like he didn't score as many tries as you said that he probably should have. I'd love, obviously, like soccer uses the XG stat, like expected goals. I'd love if the NRL had some kind of expected try rate where you look at the quality of chance that a player had compared to defenders or whatever. It'd be a hard metric to do, but I'd love to look at sort of some advanced metrics when it comes to Ramian and see what kind of attacking output he could have had. I'm interested to see how they use Kendi and Hynes, if they're going to hit Ramian short or if they're going to sort of hit the wing on the outside. But yeah, a big uptick in production when it comes to Ramian. I don't see it dropping off a cliff dramatically. And as you said, if you can sort of find the white line a couple of times, then there could be an increase in the 63. I'm always just wary of those huge huge average spikes, considering, only average 48.6. The second centre wing position, this is where we're going to differ, but I think you will change it when I tell you why. I am quite confident you have Matt Ikuvalu there, but recent news has come out and said that Fitzgibbon is basically preferring the combination of Tracy and Ramian. With that information, I'm assuming you would just change to Tracy if you knew that beforehand.
There's a little bit of a flow-on effect. I actually have Connor Tracy as my 14 because he can pretty much fill any position in the back line was my reasoning for putting him there. if I take Ikevalu out, he probably drops out of my side altogether. Tracy would obviously go into the 3, and then I'd have to look at what my options are in terms of who becomes the 14 for the club.
Can we please talk about Connor Tracy? Because he's owned
I really like Connor Tracy.
He is owned by 0.7% of teams, which is roughly right now about 200 people. Now, on the surface of things, Connor Tracy doesn't look fantastic, averaged 48 last year. But he played 9 games at centre wing. He bounced around between 6, the bench, and the wing, and then finally nailed down a spot.
Some wing. Huh?
Yeah, finally nailed down a spot in the centre wings. He finally nailed down a spot in the centres for the Sharks. Had a 9-game sample size and quietly went about his work, averaging 57.4. So what's that, 9 points of value when he's priced at 424k, similar to what Stags is. And if people are concerned Stags goes from a 62 average down to a 58 or so because he doesn't have goal kicking, I mean, there's a world where we get behind Connor Tracy. I feel like we aren't talking about him enough. With a better side around him, solidified the position, he could easily push into those low 60s.
Look, I've actually always been keen on Connor Tracy because I feel like there's a lot of Matt Burton in him.
Really good ball. Good ball player on the edge.
Yeah, like he's a half that's moved into the center. He's proved that he can actually play center and defend quite well. So he's going to have that ability to obviously be used as the extra 5'8" at center of the way that Burton was. And for that reason, I was always had an eye on him. I just wasn't confident if he was going to win the spot or not. So I haven't publicly said anything about him. I was always going to sneakily put him in on TLT if named, because I think the price point is very good. And I really like whatever. I really want to know what side Hynes is going to play.
That's the thing. And that's a caveat I've put here because Tracy will line up on the left. I mean, if it's, we'll touch on the halves in a second, but if it's who I think it is, I'm worried. If it's who you think it is, I'm more keen.
Look, I'm not going to hold back. I think it's going to be Matt Moylan. I think this is the season for him. You want another contract with us? Go out there and earn it. He obviously played off the bench a lot last season, but he did get through the season without, paper hamstringing 4 or 5 times like he always does.
And he looked pretty good last year, to be honest. Like in the time
when he played, he did come off the bench and look quite good. I think Fitzgibbon wants the maturity that Moylan can bring in that position to partner with Hynes, and for that reason, I've picked Moylan as the 6 come TLT. Obviously, partnered with Nico Hynes in the 7. That's how I see it. Otherwise, obviously, I don't know if this is what you have. The alternative, obviously, is Trindle. But in that case, I feel like you kind of got 2 7s playing beside each other as opposed to a 6 and a 7. And that concerns me a little bit.
I was surprised you named Trindle. I was surprised you named Moylan because you've been on the Trindle wagon.
I like Trindle as an option, as a super coach option, but I'm just not sure he's actually going to make the 17. You might have to wait his time.
When we were discussing our sides probably 3 weeks ago, and you mentioned Trindle, I really did like that move. Permitted he got the start, but I just don't think he does. Like all the talk out of the Sharks is Moylan Hynes, Moylan Hynes, Moylan Hynes. I haven't heard Trindle's name once, apart from obviously some people sprouting that he may start. I just don't see it. I feel like Hynes and Trindle are too similar. Moylan has progressed from an eyes up footy player into more of a controller. Obviously not an elite controller, but he has changed his game. Whereas I feel like if you have Trindle and Hynes, you've got 2 similar players. Look, I'm not saying that Trindle and Hynes won't end up playing together, but for the first 5 rounds, I just feel like it's Moiser and it's Hynes together. And I don't mind that because that gives Will Kennedy some more freedom on the left-hand side, which therefore could open up Connor Tracy, who we were just talking about before. So, yeah, I also have Moylan and Hynes. I was expecting you to say Trindle, but we have the same halves pairing and we have the same backline pairing, basically. So the first 1 to 7's unchanged. You've got Ikevalu, but you would put Tracy there knowing what you know now. The front row...
Ikevalu could sorry to cut you off. Ikevalu could challenge Katoa, I think, for the right wing, though. There is a world where they're competing for that spot because Katoa definitely has a lot of defensive flaws, and Fitzgibbon would be more of a defensive-orientated coach, I believe, coming from the Roosters. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that Ikevalu could put Katoa, on the spot as in terms of playing on that wing.
You've also got Jensen Tonomapea as well. He is one of the juniors making a push. I think he's behind Ikevalu, but he's definitely one to have, and it's a good problem to have if you're Sharks fans. You've now got some decent depth coming through, which is always what you want with a quality 17. Moving into the Pigs, I think Dale Finucane picks himself. He hasn't signed to go sit the bench, and Cam McInnes hasn't signed to play 9. So you'd think Finucane takes one of the prop spots, followed by Blake Brayley, and then Rudolph would move from 13 to 10 as well, in my book.
I've got a slight difference. So I do have Finucane in the 8. I don't disagree that Tony Rudolph could play in the 10. I've actually got Braden Hamlin, ULA, starting in the 10 with Rudolph coming off the bench.
Yep, that's cool. You got me mid drink there. That's fine. I don't mind that. I think Rudolph starts. I don't think he'd done anything wrong to not lose a start, but if Hamlin ULA starts and Rudolph comes off the bench, they're both guys that'll probably play similar minutes and be quite interchangeable. So I don't really think it matters what numbers they wear. They both play a similar role. Now, back row was interesting. I think Wade Graham picks himself as the captain, and when he's fit, no shocks there. But the other back row position, you've got Sifa Talakai, you've got Teague Wilton, you've got Jack A. Williams, you've got Britton Nakora, who I've leaned with for this round 1 side. I don't love it, but I think Britton Nakora is probably the safest of the options. You could go with the X Factor in Talakai, or you could go with the youngster in Teague Wilton. But I think they might just lean towards Nakora because you want to try and keep as much harmony as you can, and then maybe look to make changes if it's not working out, because Britton Nakora has not really progressed. We saw him in his breakout season when he was a rookie in 2019. He averaged 60. The year later, he averaged 57. Last year, he averaged 55. And you'd think with SJ in the side, he would have done very well because he's a very good line runner, but it's just not being put together. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him drop out. But
yeah, I'm not sure. He did start on the edge in every game last season, bar 1, where he obviously 2 actually. He did get dropped for 2 weeks, and then he'd come back in and did go back to usual minutes on the edge. Generally 80. Sometimes, he got 71, 72 minutes. I have picked him. I do think it's probably his spot to lose, but I will say that if he doesn't show more, like he did say in his debut season, where he was fantastic as a rookie and he had really big raps on him, and then there's just been slow declines over the last couple of years. So there's definitely pressure on him. You mentioned Wilton. I really like him.
yeah, he looked really good last year. Like when he
Talakai-
played, Wilton looked really good last year when he played, and made it a real headache for SuperCoach owners because he kept getting picked and kept putting up scores, and you had to ask yourself, okay, well, when do we pull the trigger?
Yeah, that he did. I'm not sure. Talakai's, he's one of those guys, I just don't know what his position is. He's one of those hybrid type guys. I don't know where he fits best. He's played some time at centre. He's played some time on the edge. He's big enough, obviously, to fill in at prop, etc. I actually don't have him in my 17, which might be a bit controversial, but I couldn't figure out where to put this guy.
I mean, he's a defensive liability, but the question is, do you put up with how much of a liability he's in defence for the absolute explosiveness that he has? God, I remember last year. So I have a lot of players that played SuperCoach for the first time last year, and for weeks and weeks and weeks, I pumped up Sifa Talakai. He finally got the start. Everyone brought him in. He did nothing, and people started to question the hype around him. There is an abundance of talent there. If he can find a way to make good, effective tackles under a defensive coach in Fitzy, he could be anything because he is such an explosive ball runner. He is such a weird body shape to try and tackle. Like, he isn't tall, but he's just wide. But he's not like
He's a nugget.
He's just not fat. He's just a wide man. And
He's a nugget.
You're right. Like, he's explosive enough to play in the centres. He's big enough to play prop forward, and he's a fantastic ball runner to play on the edge. But is that the Connor Watson syndrome? Is he too versatile for his own good and will always be a bench player?
100%. And that's my fear with him. And when I was looking at the players that could be on the bench, I was like, well, do I want to hold this person back for a guy like Talakai? And that was where I was really scratching my head. So I've got him as the 18th man. I think he's the perfect 18th man. If a situation happens where you need to pull someone in, what an asset to have, wherever the injury or the concussion that opens up the 18th spot falls, he can pretty much fill most of those.
Let's finish up with the lock, and then we'll go back and dissect basically the players that we've put in, and we'll give pros and cons. No surprises, and no genius is not going to pick Cam McInnes. He's signed to play 13, and he'll be the 13 round one, barring any injury.
Absolutely. Top 5 to FR this year. Cameron McInnes, love him. I've currently got him in my hooker slots. I'm excited to see him return.
2FR, 2 forward row. Others,
Yes.
yeah. All right, so let's go back to Matt Moylan and Nicho Hynes. Guys that we brushed over, but we mentioned their stocks when it comes to NRL, but we'll mention their SuperCoach stocks. So Matt Moylan, I mean, he's got job issue security. Let's not beat around the bush. There's the issue with that. It's not like last year. I think we bought him for $240K last year, coming in much more expensive than that this year. I haven't even looked at him, but I can just imagine he's more expensive. And I'd much prefer Trindle for SuperCoach. Like, if we're picking a SuperCoach 13, then Trindle's in. Obviously, Matt Moylan, there's better options when it comes to Hastings, Ilias. I mean, even Connor Tracy, you could put at 5'8" over Matt Moylan. So he's a pass for me. Nicho Hynes. All right. So inflated average at fullback. No denying that whatsoever. I think we all understand that the price we're paying for in round 1 is inflated. He's coming from a better team and a better system. For me, he's a big avoid for at least 2 months. Brew, however, has a different sort of set of beliefs, and that's great because we can discuss that. I said this to you when we were discussing halves, man. I'd prefer to take Hughes over Hynes. I've got a bad feeling about Hynes, and I feel like even if he goes well, it's a 65 average, and that's a big drop off from where he's priced at.
What's the average stat?
78.7 or 78.6 off the top of my head.
78.2. So
78.2.
What he finished on last year is what he's priced at this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And he's got. Give me a second.
So I'll just stall for time while Brew's putting it up. My biggest thing is at fullback he is on the end of the attacks and he's hitting holes that you're not going to have at half. And I've seen people say that he's going to play like a fullback at 7. I just don't see that happening. I'm assuming you got your stats now, so far away.
Why not though? What we're talking about the ball out the back. Sweeping play basically, and that's where he gets all his try assists. Who's to say that he's not getting that ball himself from
so
Moylan
then why not just drop Will
role?
Kennedy, play Trindle, and then play Hynes at fullback? Like I feel like he's going to be like 2 phases in, and it's just going to stifle him so much. Like he's going to have to do a Matt Burton at the halves and try and break the line much further close to the goalpost, and that's just how I'm feeling it. If you want him to be this dynamic, off the cuff, wider dude, just drop Will Kennedy and pick Trindle and play Hynes at fullback. I haven't seen much of Nicho Hynes before last year, so I might sound really ignorant here, but I'm not too sure why you've signed a bloke on a pretty hefty contract when he's unproven at the level in the halves, but when he looked phenomenal at fullback, which is probably harsh on Will Kennedy, and I don't think Will Kennedy deserves to be dropped. So it's just a really, really awkward thing that sort of I'm thinking right now. And Sharks fans are going to hate that because they've got their marquee half. And I don't hate it. I just don't... It's just confusing. It could be a masterstroke, to be honest.
He was a 5'8", though. When he played in the Q Cup, he didn't play fullback. I know he played fullback and he made it his own at the Storm, but that's not...
Yeah, but
that wasn't his role in the Q Cup.
The modern age, you can't... I don't think you can use he was a 5'8" excuse, because in the modern game, there's no half and 5'8". It's just 2 playmakers on either side of the field. Like, I understand 15 years ago when you used to have the 7, the 6, and then the 1 all on one side, and they'd sort of shift sides. Whereas now, like, one sits on the right, one sits on the left, apart from someone like Nathan Cleary, who swings both ways and has Luai float a little bit deeper. Do you see Moylan and Hynes having that ability straight away to be able to do that? I don't know if you do.
I look at it and go, okay, so he's averaged at 78 or whatever it is.
Can we agree that's overs though? Can we disagree that 78 is overs?
It depends how you look at it.
Such a politician answer.
No, but are you really going to care if you pay up front for him? If over the first 5 weeks he averages 80, and he's
Oh, you look
got
like a
the West
genius,
Tigers,
and I look like a dickhead.
Newcastle, shithouse, St. George, shithouse. Sorry for the swearing, but Canberra, not that great. Parramatta, even when they're good, they can leak points. Like, if you're telling me that a guy with as much talent as he has, who can certainly score tries, it's proven in the Q Cup. He scored plenty of them in the Q Cup. He's shown that he can set up a try, and on top of that, will most likely be their goal kicker. Let's say he's a little bit above an average 7. That would put him at, say, a 60-ish average. Then on top of that, you add his goal kicking. There's probably another 12 to 14 points if they're putting on big scores against these clubs. There's your 75. If he's averaging 75 to 90 over the first 5 weeks, you're not really going to care if at the end of the season he's averaged 70 and his price is different to what it was at the start of the season, or he's a bit cheaper. You're only going to care about points on the board.
So you're way more optimistic than I am. Like, you've got his floor at around 72, 73, whereas I've got his ceiling at like 67, 68. And the only reason why I'm so against this, will I own Nico Hynes this season? Probably. Don't ask me when, but I will probably own him at some time. The thing is, if you don't go Cleary and you go, oh, look, you're not going to run Cleary and Hynes. You're going to run Cleary or Hynes. So if you go Hynes, you're using him as a stepping stone to get to Cleary. And I just worry that if he averages like 66, 67, 68, it's a 10-point drop-off. It's a decent price leak, and you're further away from Cleary. I'd rather take a guy with some upside that you could use as a stepping stone, whereas like Hynes, like, I just feel like this is it. Like, I don't really see a whole lot of SuperCoach improvement, and we're paying sky high for him as it is. Like, we're paying money for him off the back of a career year, and coming in I don't want to sound disrespectful, but a much worse side than the Melbourne Storm. It's, I don't know, it's going to be one that I'm really keen to watch, because you and I have very different views on this topic. There's no sort of fence sitting when it comes to you and I when it comes to Hynes. So I'm very, very excited to see how it goes. I want you to do well. You want me to do well. So I'm hoping we can find a good middle ground where Hynes plays well for the Sharks. Sharks fans are happy. Storms fans feel like they got the best out of him. It's what I'm really, really interested in. So we'll leave the Hynes chat there, because I don't think you and I are going to change each other's opinions just yet. I could come around. I'm coming around to another Sharks player who I was very, very off in the middle of November, so we'll touch on him soon. We've touched on the 6 and 7. Let's touch on the 8, 9, 10. For Nukin, look, he had a pretty decent drop-off when it comes to PPM last year. If he is leaned upon in minutes, you could maybe expect a 53 to 54 average. I just think there's better options for what we're getting. People are enticed by the price, but I don't see Finucane playing bigger minutes than what he really was at the Storm. He might play maybe 5 or 6 more minutes, but he was never really a 1 ppm kind of guy, so I'm kind of cold on him. I've got a few messages around Finucane. It's the only reason why I'd mention it, but yeah, I'm not really keen.
Barely looked at him, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to be honest. I know I would have rattled off his numbers when we did the second row or front row forward podcast, but he's just.
To be honest, I don't even think he made that cut. So if he didn't make,
he's just not a SuperCoach player for me.
Exactly. Nor is Blake Brayley. To be honest, Randall will do a better job for a much cheaper price. And it's saying a lot when I wouldn't even touch Blake Brayley in draft, let alone classic. So yeah, I'm kind of off him too. I'll touch on Rudolph's numbers. If you want to talk about Braden Hamlin-Uela, you can. But to be honest, I feel like they're pretty interchangeable. Look, unfortunately, Rudolph is competing with guys like Stefano for a similar price. And Stefano just has way more upside. I feel like he's got better minute security compared to Rudolph, even if he does start. So another one of these guys I'd put in the Finucane bracket. Rudolph, I don't know. One of those guys where, like, I don't look at him for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I look at his score that week, and he scores like 65 all in base, and then I'll just forget about him, and then he'll just repeat that. But yeah, only average sort of middling 50s last year.
So who's your 17th player?
My 17th player, we'll touch on the bench now. I've got Hamlin-Uela at 14, Teague Wilton, Talakai, and I've got Aiden Tolman. I mean, you can put Franklin Pele there. I think they're kind of interchangeable with whatever middle they pick.
I've got Franklin Pele.
Yeah.
I did forget about Tolman though.
Don't hate that. We'll touch on the bench after we touch on the players. But yeah, look, I've gone Tolman. You can go Pele. You can go Royce Hunt. You can go Andrew Fafita. Doesn't really matter. I think they all.
There's going to be some big name omissions, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think you can take a Dad's Army bench and pick all the experienced heads. I don't think that will work for them. They've got to get the right balance. That's why I really like Pele. I know he's been impressing at training. So
I like Pele because he follows me on Instagram. Shout out to Franklin Pele.
I saw that actually.
What a champ. Look, we'll go back to Brayley and Rudolph. Not keen on either of those two. So for Rudolph, similar price to Stefano, who just has way more upside.
Yep.
Any love for Hamlin Ueli, even if he does start? Big body.
Potentially. If he starts, he's pretty cheap. And I know, I think years and years ago, he probably was roughly a 55, 60 average player. So if he were to find some old form for his price, it can be difficult to get those cheaper guys in front row forward. If we don't get a Max King, who I think is probably unlikely, and outside of Moroa, you might be looking for a guy that was around that 300 mark, and he could be that guy.
Yeah, there's just so many middles at the Sharks. I'm really put off by all of them, to be honest. When it comes to Wade Graham, he doesn't have the upside that is worth the risk. So, look at someone like Ryan Madison, who has, let's be honest, similar concussion issues when it comes to that part of the game. At least Ryan Madison has that 75-point upside. It's worth the risk. Whereas Wade Graham has just been on a steady decline year on year on year. Same with scores, same with PPM. Not worth.
I've actually got Wade Graham as my X factor.
Oh.
We're on different levels here.
Why? What in the last 4 years has shown you that Wade Graham is going to be an X factor?
He can average close to 60 if he can stay on the park. The problem is his average gets sucked down every single year by these games where he plays 18 minutes or 20 minutes. If you take those out, his scores aren't too bad. And quite often, just as he's starting to look good and, get involved in the scoring piece is when he goes down with a concussion and we don't see him again. He's going to be ready for this season. I think he's quite cheap. I can't remember his price for this season, but I looked at him and went, he could be a real X factor player if the Sharks do get off to a hot start and you need a cheapish second rower. You could easily put him in there and he could do a job for you to start the season.
All right. So as I'm pulling up his stats, last year in the games he played, he had one score above 60. The year before that, when he basically played a full season, I can see that he had 1, 2, 3 scores above 60 in the back row and 1 score above 60 playing 6, which Wade Graham playing 6 is a very weird thing. So he's had 4 scores above 50, above 60 in the last 2 years. Last year was the year before last was a 57 average. You have to go back to 2017 when he has averaged more than 60, and he just averaged 60 flat. So you and I are on very, very different wavelengths when it comes to this. I just don't see it because, if he goes down, he's going to go down with a score of 12 after 15 minutes, which is what we saw him do last year multiple times. And yeah, I just feel like it's going to leak too much cash. So I'm missing him completely. Britton Okora, we touched on him. He had a fantastic rookie year, average 60, and then he's gone 57, 55. You could put it down to a second-year syndrome, and then he did it again. So this is his 4th year now in the NRL, and he's failed to really look good. I thought he was going to be a New Zealand international after that first season he had, because he linked up exceptionally well, really good ball runner. But yeah, we've touched on him enough that it just hasn't lived up, and he's probably too awkwardly priced to even look at. I'd prefer someone like a Ricky with the upside that he's got. And Cam McInnes, mate. Now, this is the player that I've written the most on. This is the player that I'm slowly coming around to. Listeners of the show know, back in mid-November, when prices and stuff were released, that I was quite cold. But he is the opposite of Wade Graham. He's increasing year on year on year, culminated with a 76 average in 2020. When he's fully fit, he definitely has that motor to play 70-plus minutes. No doubt about that at all. But the problem is he's very, very hard to analyse. What's his use post-injury? How is he going to be used? I think trials are a big, big one to look at when it comes to Cam McInnes. At the Dragons, he was the big fish in the small pond. He was asked to do a lot. Look, he had a 67.75 base, pure base at 13. 68 base at 13. That is enticing. He never had a game below 68 minutes when he played 13. However, this is the issue that I have, and this is the reason why I'm scared. He had not one attacking stat at 13. Compare that to him at 9. He had a try, 2 try assists, 2 line break assists. Nothing at 13. Nada, zilch, nothing. Whoever you want to entitle it, he had nothing at 13, which to me leads him to be very, very minutes dependent. If he was at 9, I would be more enticed. He is going to have to play 60 to 65 minutes minimum to live up to the standards that he set before. Thankfully, he doesn't have to live up to those standards. He's only priced at 509k or something like that. You'll correct me when you rattle off 535. So he only has to surpass that, which he should. But he is very minutes dependent. Trials will tell a huge, huge part when it comes to Cam McInnes, and for that reason, he is not in my side. But do not be surprised to see him feature in my squad once I see him pumping out 70 minutes in trials. The floor is yours.
I've harped on about McInnes all pre-season long, so I don't feel like I need to harp on too much more. It basically just comes down to, does he start 13? Yes or no? He will. He'll get at least 60 minutes, if not 65 minutes. I can see him actually filling in for Blake Brayley quite a bit, reduce his 80-minute games.
I think that depends
get McInnes to fill in there.
Sorry, I think that depends on who they pick at 14, because a few sides, Fox League, have Jaden Beryl at 14, who we touched on before in the inclusions. So if Beryl plays 14, I'm all over McInnes, because it's just less. It's just one less body off the bench that's going to take minutes away from him. I just wanted to add that before I forgot it. Sorry.
His base is enough for me. If you look at his averages, they go up by 8 every single season. So by that, he's going to average 84 this season, and I'm going to be a very happy man.
I don't think he's averaging 84.
60, 68, 76, 84.
Of course. But look, realistically, where do we see him sitting if he was to play 70 minutes a game? Do you think it's
top 5, second row?
Do you think he's around 1 ppm? So do you think he's around 70 average?
Yeah. Easy.
I'm just worried about the no attacking stats at 13. That's the only issue. But
he hasn't played many games there.
No, it was a small sample size. And he could line up anywhere.
Like he could end up doing some stuff at hooker and getting some try assists. You don't know how they're going to work it. So I'm not too worried about that, because his base is so good that you'll just take the numbers anyway.
Yeah, this is not a Hynes yes or no debate. This is a more where Brew and I see his minutes lying. 65 minutes and more over. 60 minutes, I'm probably still over. Anything less, I'm getting less and less keen on. The positive thing is he's had a whole entire year to rehab this. We know ACLs are an absolute prick to come back from. Forwards less so than backs, because it does take away your explosiveness and your elusiveness, which, I mean, Cam McInnes is missing a tooth. Elusiveness really isn't in his game. He'll put his head where I wouldn't put my foot. So really, really like him. The base is fantastic. The bench will be a huge thing for Brew and I as well. I don't think I can do anything to talk Brew off McInnes, but the bench will definitely help his ceiling. And if he can fill in at 9, perfect, because then, those attacking chances come up. Plays hooker very similar to someone like a Brandon Smith. Loves to go for a dart 2 meters out, which is fantastic for SuperCoach. That's kind of our analysis on the top 13. We haven't touched on our benches, but mine's Hanlon, Ueli, Wilton, Talakai, and Tolman. Brew, who is your 14 to 17?
Rudolph, Wilton, Pele, and it was Connor Tracy, but if he moves out, then someone else would move into the bench, who would probably be an Aiden Tolman, I would assume. Could be
Fafita, Tolman, whoever you want to put there.
In that instance, they're not really running a utility, but so
yeah,
I'd have to have a deeper think. I didn't know the news until about a minute before we started recording, so I wasn't prepared for that.
I do like to spring these kind of things on you. When it comes to cheapies, they have 3, and I think it's the case of a 3-headed dragon. So, sorry, I don't think it's a case for 3-headed dragon. One of them lives and the other 2 dies. It's Franklin Pele at 205k, it's Andrew Fafita at 205k, and it's Royce Hunt at 243k. Don't expect all 3 of these to be named. Don't expect 2 of them to be named. But if one of them gets named...
There's a chance that none of them get named.
Yeah, there's a huge chance none of them get named. But out of the Sharks roster, and probably Jansen Tonomapia, as we touched on before, or even like Moeen Harodi, who's 340k, but that's just a bit too steep for me to be looking at. So Tonema Pia is a bottom dollar price centre wing. Franklin Pele and Fafita are both the same price at 205k, and Royce Hunt. So one of them will get picked. Sorry, I'll caveat that. If any of them get picked, it's one of them. I probably have Pele, Fafita, and Hunt in that order when it comes to preferences. So look, yeah, plenty of talking up Franklin Pele. If you need to see what the kid's capable of, go back and watch the trial last year. They played the Dragons, and he was an absolute machine. It was a game Luke Metcalf carved up in as well, Jaden Sullivan carved up in, and Talatau Monet also carved up in. So pretty good trial to go back and have a look. He's a huge body. If you guys haven't seen him play last year, he made his debut. Just a big body, very young kid. So cool. And Fafita, if it was 2016, I'd be all over him. But Father Time is very creeping up on Fafita. Cool.
Agreed.
That's basically it. Brew didn't have anything else to add to that. Mate, we've been running for about 46 minutes now. So Sharks, pretty keen on them this year. I think the Sharkies fans have a lot to like. I think NRL neutrals will have a lot to like as well when it comes to the Sharkies.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be some SuperCoach assets in this side. We just need to wait and see who they are. I think I know who they are, but time will tell.
One of them is not Nico Hynes. I'll let you guys know that right now. All right, guys, that is going to do it for the Sharks wrap up. Hopefully, you've had a good Monday. Monday-itis is gone. Brew and I will be back Wednesday as per usual, and then Friday, and we'll do it all again until Teamless Tuesday. Hopefully, I can get some equipment working. I should be live on YouTube on Tuesday night at 7:30 Eastern time, doing a few Rate My Teams. We're supposed to do it last week, but internet shit itself. So fingers crossed we can get that working. Come in, chat with me, say hi. It'll be a very casual stream. So yeah, anything else that you want to plug, mate?
No, I'm all good, mate. All good.
All right. As always, ciao for now.
Ciao for now, guys.
Bye.